and that will come up as a separate file. So, right. So I just wanted to welcome my guest today, Alex Williams, who's a guy who I've known for about, well, probably 15, 17-ish years, probably since I was, probably 20 years. I reckon since I was 17, 18, illegally going to Distinction and Cartouche as a 17-year-old in Ipswich. Alex is a mental health nurse, but I'm going to let him kind of maybe just say a little bit about himself to begin with and introduce himself. Weirdly, as I say, I've known him for nearly 20 years and we ironically both trained together. But yeah, so morning, Alex. Nice to see you.
Morning, mate. Thank you for having me. So pleasure. I'm Alex Williams. I'm a professional speaker, authenticity coach, and a mental health practitioner. And I work with young people, say young adults, teenagers, to help them basically identify what they really want to give them a good chance of having healthy mental health. So yeah, essentially that's what I do. So I do that in speaking, in workshops and one-to-one coaching, mentoring, practitioning really, and sharing my expertise, not just from working in the environment, but also having gone through traumatic life experience. I lost my mum to murder when I was only 8 and kind of overcoming that, but also, you know, having to identify how that impacted my mental health growing up and what I thought I could achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that's kind of one thing which often just gets overlooked, isn't it? Of just quite how much like traumatic events is sort of in our younger years, how we go around actually observing and witnessing how that's actually influencing us now, and putting the time and the effort and work into actually looking into that straight in the eyes and kind of actually questioning ourselves. Yeah. So I guess that's probably a fairly reasonable indicator, but like, obviously, as I say, I know you from going clubbing, listening to lots of hardcore and punk and stuff, but also through nursing. We ended up both being at Suffolk College together, doing our nursing together. So like, what was it that took you down like that particular route, I guess, and how was it your previous life experience that influenced that? Or, you know,
it's interesting because it's like a lot of people who go into nursing kind of go, yeah, that's what I really want to do, but I think I'm one of the few who didn't.
I'm right with you. Yeah. Like I just kind of fell into it.
Yeah, exactly. And that was how it was for me. Like, and I think, you know, obviously I'm not talking necessarily about the way that the trauma and how I was brought up affected me, but I literally didn't think I could. I just felt I wasn't good enough at anything. And because I got paid to do my training and I just didn't know what I wanted to do, and my girlfriend and my sister at the time said to me, you know, oh, your mum was a nurse, your grandma's a nurse, why don't you go be a nurse? Do mental health, you'll be good at it. And I just thought, sod it, you know, I get 500 quid a month. It's more than what I'm getting now. If I like it, great. If I don't, I've got nothing to lose. You know?
See, I'm laughing because that is exactly the same as me. I was a painter and decorator and I got laid off, and then a mate's girlfriend who I was getting the train into Suffolk College with when I was doing my painting and decorating course, she was like, look, you haven't got a job anymore. Like, why don't you come be a nurse with me? You get like 500-600 quid a month, or you get $6,000 a year. You could, like, you know, they pay you to do it. Just come do that. And I was like, I could buy a guitar with that money. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I fell into nursing. Yeah. How funny.
And it was literally that. And now I look back, 500 quid a month. I mean, obviously, if you compare it to everyone in the world, that's a lot of money. But for me, now I look at it and think, bloody hell, how did I get by? I was going out every weekend, paying my rent, paying my food. I don't know how I got by.
I think rent was cheaper then.
It was literally, that was it. I had no aspiration to be a nurse. To be honest, I probably looked down on it a little bit in a way. And I think that's probably because of the way I was raised, in the sense of like, my dad had really high expectations of what I should or shouldn't be doing with my life.
Yeah.
I kind of was a bit embarrassed, but I actually loved it, to be honest. The training I loved. You know, there was some people who would go to placements, go, oh, I hate that placement, but I actually enjoyed all my like placements, all my experiences. And so like, for me, I kind of felt like I was a little bit in my element in a way. And not, I wouldn't say it was my purpose, but like, I felt like I had some purpose, you know, I felt like I had something to give, something to contribute. And it was, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I think that's, rings so many bells with me. Like, I fell into it, and then was just kind of like, actually, I'm kind of all right at this.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I quite like, especially when I got into like the more acute side of things, was like, you know, coronary care was just awesome. Like, and I kind of look back at that between coronary care and A&E, how it's then influenced me to where I am today, is like actually been pretty massive, like stepping stones, I guess, because of, I guess, what I learned physiologically, like emotionally about people and whatever else. So, and I guess that's kind of goes into what I was wondering next, is how, because obviously you and I have both stepped away from nursing these days, as in, like, I guess you would say traditional nursing. I'd like to still think that in some ways we're probably being, you know, still bringing that same element, but just in a very different sphere. But how is that kind of, those experiences, that kind of career step, then kind of given you, I guess, the tools and whatever else to, and the the influence to bring you to where you are today?
Well, I think for many years, and I think it's the same for you, in mental health and physical health, we tend to treat the worst, you know, in the sense of the really unwell people.
Yeah.
And for a while, I think for many years, I just kind of got on with it. You know, we just do what you're told. The doctor prescribes medication, you give medication. And for some, you know, this isn't me poo-pooing medication. Sometimes people just need medication to save their lives, or just to stop them from fucking their lives up, really. You know,
Yeah,
they're
totally.
They're
100%.
assaulting people or hurting themselves. Sometimes they just need stopping. But as I kind of started to work in the community and kind of see people, I was kind of like, I kind of started having this doubt of like wondering if it really was all working. You know, was the model of care that we provide, let's just say the NHS, and I'm again not trying to destroy the NHS here, but the model of care really serving the greater public? Because we're seeing mental health cases go up, supposedly. More and more people need treatment and support. And I'm thinking, but I was kind of thinking, well, when it's not working, just putting people in hospital, just giving them meds, you know, we need to give them more. And so I was like, this idea in my head was like, what if we, rather than, you know, people tend to like have to knock on the door 10 times before they get help, you know, they have to really go for their GP. The GP might send them, give them some meds. They go back 2 or 3 times to get meds. And then eventually the GP's like, I'll do a referral to a team. You're then on the waiting list. You might get seen. You might get offered one intervention, sense maybe some brief, you know, CBT. If that doesn't work, it kind of just escalates, and it basically gets to the point where, and this sounds really bad, but I'm going to say it because it's really, unless you the idea is, unless you're causing from a mental health system perspective, is unless you're causing us a problem, you're not our problem.
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense? So what happens?
Yeah, no, it does. And I think my kind of experience in A&E was a little bit similar to that.
And that's not how clinicians work.
No.
I don't think. But it's how a system, I don't think we're aware of how the system actually works. And I was like, well, rather than people waiting 10 times, for example, to knock on a door and finally being helped, you know, when they're finally like, I'm taking an overdose, or like, I'm literally destroying my life. What if, like, when they knocked on the door the first, second or third time, we were doing stuff with those people, giving them the skills, the tools to kind of develop resilience, to better manage, to regulate their emotions, and to kind of have more purpose in life? Then essentially, even though there's a lot more people who would fit under that umbrella, you're probably the duration of the intervention required for that would be so much less that over a long period,
100%.
The effect would be massive, and we would, I imagine, have less people requiring high level intervention.
Absolutely. And I think this is kind of goes back to what you kind of said about the healthcare services that was providing or something, is really, we're now at a stage where it's not, I mean, this again, like, in no way am I kind of, as you say, kind of shitting on the NHS or anything like that, but it's like everything's so overstretched now that it's kind of like, it's no longer a healthcare service, it's actually like a sickness care service. And so we're only actually looking after people when they get sick. And actually the problem is, it's like now backed up so much that, you know, we've kind of come to this stage where, as you say, kind of increasing levels of mental health problems. And, you know, even from my perspective, being more cardiac A&E, even the increasing levels of cardiovascular issues and, I'd like to say kind of even musculoskeletal issues, because, you know, back pains, you know, knees, hips, stuff like that, quite often is a similar case of a sick society. I'm going to say sick like, you know, but like a sick society, which is just hasn't evolved the tools to realistically on a mass scale cope with what, you know, life in the 21st century is throwing at us, you know, like whether it be this, you know, Zoom calls rather than actually getting in on your, you know, getting up and going and meeting someone for a talk, and, you know, moving about more, etc.
Yeah.
And I do think there is that, like, that illness, that sickness, illness kind of healthcare model, rather than a true, how can we assist people to be healthy humans. And I think, and, you know, and you know, I don't know if this is kind of what would go through your head, but I would be in A&E or coronary care, and I would just be thinking, you know, the horse has already bolted. You know, you know, we're closing that fucking that stable door after the horse has already gone. And that kind of got to the stage where, for me, and it probably sounds like for you, it was especially the longer I was there, the more I was just thinking, I'm giving out these pills, but these people are coming back, like,
exactly,
you know, to a year and a half down the line, they're coming back with more heart problems, etc., etc. And, you know, and I never went to the community as such, but I, you know, I think A&E was almost a bit like community, and it was a bit like, I need to go one step further. I need to try and stop these people ever needing to come to this point here. And, you know, for me, it's, I don't know if it is for you, but for me, it was very much like, I want to help the NHS, but in a completely different way. I want the NHS to be there for when you need it.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, need it. And by doing that, like, it meant stepping away from the NHS.
100%. Yeah. And it's really good, really good that you talk about like that sickness model, because I think in mental health, I think it's something that we're trying to move away from, but the system again is in the way, is getting in the way of that. And I'll give an example. The kind of last job I did before I decided to do this was, I was working at a university as a care coordinator, supporting students with their mental health problems. The aim being, you know, mental health in university is massive. There's been lots of high profile suicides over the last few years. So these people, you know, it's huge going to university. It's a massive change for so many people.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there was this one, the people would get referred to our service, like they may present at A&E or they go to the GP service at the university. And anyway, there was this one person who was referred to me, who had gone to A&E and just was feeling a bit suicidal. Now, there was no history, no real problems. They were just, and all it was, and I don't say all it was, but I've said it now. They got their heart broke. They got dumped, right?
Yep.
Now, we all know, if you've ever had your heart broken for the first time, it's probably the worst thing in the world. It sucks.
Yeah.
But what happened is that because she went there and was feeling suicidal, they decided to say this person had a personality disorder. And that came to me, and I read all the documentation, and I was like, actually, that's just a normal human experience.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a diagnosis. They've just gone through a shit time, and they don't know how to process, don't know how to really manage it. And like you said about how, like, and it got me thinking, why are we doing this? Why are we label the reason? And it made me think, I don't think mental health is going up, really. I think it's just we're telling everyone there's something wrong with them when they have an emotional experience.
Just labeling and diagnosing everyone for like, absolutely.
And when you say about like trying to stop people from getting into the NHS or help the NHS, I was like, well, of course we can talk about responsibility, and I'm a massive advocate of responsibility. Your life is your own, right? No one owes you a thing, in my opinion. Like, and I acknowledge.
I think I'm with you there as well.
Yeah, there's loads of socio-economic, cultural factors that mean that some people don't really get an opportunity to take responsibility. We have to acknowledge that. But most of us, especially in this country, to an extent, can take responsibility. But people only know what they know, and unless they know this stuff, they're not in a position to go, oh, by the way, you know what, maybe I need to work on some breath work, because it's not taught in schools. We're not teaching people in the workplace these stuff. We're not teaching people about how to set goals in their lives, how to actually identify what matters, their values, you know, the feelings they want to feel more of, and this sort of stuff that actually gives you a good baseline, a foundation to build healthy life from. And as you say, we're waiting for people to get really unwell when they've developed really unhelpful habits, when they're literally life's gone to shit, and then we're saying, take this, oh, you're not unwell enough now to need us anymore. And then they're just gone away. And yeah, okay, it's like we've stuck a plaster over it. You're okay for a bit. But like I said, then they just come back a few months later, or maybe a year later, or whatever. And it's like, oh my God, you know, so we're never really solving the problem. It's like trying to kill a weed by just cutting the top off it. You know, when you're lazy,
Yeah, absolutely.
with a lawnmower, and
you
like,
never actually get, never dig it up at the
but
roots.
it'll come back in a couple of weeks because it'll just grow through.
This kind of makes me think a little bit about, did you read Lost Connections by Johann Hari?
No.
Did you read that book? It's pretty interesting because it's all about like mental health and depression and like anxiety type. But he's kind of looking at it as from the different models. And he basically says how, you know, essentially people lack community, people lack essentially those connections which allow them to actually feel themselves. And so the problem is we're giving them medication, and but the problem is the medication doesn't actually really work. And he was, you know, when he was at uni, he was on antidepressants, and he thought they were the greatest thing in the world, saying everyone needs to be on antidepressants because oh my God, and then you're just on a bigger and bigger and a bigger and a bigger and a bigger dose, because after the first 3 weeks they stop, you know, or whatever it is, 3 months or something, you know, it just kind of stops working. So therefore you have to go and get a bigger dose, and then you get put on a stronger one. And it's like very much that kind of just palm it off. Like, we won't actually teach you tools. We won't actually give you any assistance to learn and understand this feeling that you're feeling. And, you know, and as like I pointed out, I think tech, while it's amazing for so many amazing things, we haven't evolved yet to understand the stress that it perhaps adds to our life in many ways. And probably in some ways with what you do with the youngsters, and, you know, actually maybe getting them to realize that talking in person, and I know we can't go down the pub at the moment, but essentially, like, you know, having that real life interaction rather than through a screen is actually a completely different mind, you know, chemical game compared to, you know, being through a screen or in person. And I don't, you know, why would anyone know that? As you say, you only know what you know. And we're you know, we're not taught. Again, you know, if we were taught this stuff at school, we then can take responsibility and say that now I'm being taught this, I can now maybe implement it in my life. But you're right. I think in the current climate, it is we were already moving to a digital world already. We're already in it. We know everything is on this, really. I can literally run my life from this technically if I wanted to. Doesn't mean it's going to be good. And obviously we're in lockdown, you know, so we're not getting those connections, so it's hard. But like, it is, you know, we do thrive off each other, you know, and I think like the life, as much as like that we weren't advanced in medicine and like people did die younger like hundreds of years ago, I think naturally they were better within themselves because they had to sit within themselves and identify what was going on. They couldn't like go, right, oh my God, I'm feeling anxious, I better go on Instagram and just distract myself. And tell everyone about it, or go on Instagram and tell everyone about it. And you kind of get that response of, you know, you go on and tell people because you want them to give you some feedback and say, oh, I love you, hun, like, you know, heart, you know. And there's no actual, you know, you kind of put the word kind of responsibility. I think you said responsibility, you know, people are responsible for their own, like, and, you know, the more I've kind of doing this stuff, the more it's about taking responsibility for myself and like the, you know, the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, the sensations that I have and how I then react or don't react to those things. But again, I think there's very much this, you know, why on earth would, you know, most people, and this kind of comes on to my next question a little bit, but like most people can't differentiate between like, you know, a sensation, whatever it might be, must be true because I'm feeling it. Now, this, I guess, comes down to my next question of like, there's that whole kind of thought around, and especially in modern medicine, there is this duality, if you like. There's mental health and there's physical health. They're not the same fucking thing. You've got like, I don't know, heart problems, therefore you go and see a cardiologist. Oh, you've got anxiety, therefore you're going to go and see a psychiatrist, like whatever it might be, you know. And that you have this duality and it's split. And I was reading something about Socrates and Plato yesterday, and they discuss this at some point. And Plato says, oh, you know, there's like a separation, you know, you can't trust your feelings, you can't trust your emotions, they're kind of from your senses. So therefore, and Plato and Socrates says, no, actually, like, you can't separate. There is no separation. Mind and body are one. So, you know, we've probably mainly gone through this, but it'd be really interesting to see from your experience nursing, and then moving into where you are now. Obviously, as nurses, you still, you know, even as a mental health nurse, you start doing your basic training in kind of just general adult medical health. So, you know, where do you sit on that side of things?
I am definitely in that it's all linked. You know, the mind and body are one. You know, psychiatric symptoms are technically physical symptoms, and often physical symptoms are psychiatric symptoms. You know,
yeah.
They're the same. You know, you look at someone who, you know, who maybe that develops diabetes, is obese, might be doing some comfort eating, might have also been raised by other people who have the same eating habits, so have learned from that and kind of believe that's the right thing to do, or believe that's the way you manage your emotions. And, you know, equally, like, we know that when we're under a lot of stress, in the sense of maybe we've got lots going on, life events, understandably, they cause us stress, they affect, you know, us physically, and, you know, we go into more sympathetic states, eventually our body starts to break down, and you know, with anxiety, there's a lot of physical symptoms. So I think majority of mental health problems are physical problems, but I also think a lot of physical health problems come from mental health problems. So yeah, I mean, in my opinion, is that it's all linked. And I you probably had this yourself. When I was working in the NHS, it was kind of like, no, that's a physical health problem. You need to deal with that. And you're like, and then or that's a mental health problem. But it's like, why can't we work together?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, from my perspective of like coronary care again, you know, and this is, I kind of felt it, but I've done a lot more research and study into it and stuff. But it is like, oh, you've got hypertension, you've got, you know, a skyrocketed heart rate, your respiratory rate is 22 kind of constantly. And so we're going to put you on a beta blocker, we're going to put you on an ACE inhibitor, we're going to put you, you know, you probably need to be on aspirin for life, etc. You know, whatever it might be. But really, you know, they're kind of a person who's, I don't know, a 50-year-old woman who's had like a really like shit life, and, you know, life is just really stressful. She's had, you know, kids on her own or whatever it might be. And like, yes, she's got these physical symptoms, but actually, you know, they're being driven by essentially a stress response that, you know, an over breathing has, you know, skyrocketed her blood pressure, you know, as what should be a normal response to a stress suddenly becomes a chronic stress.
100%.
And that's when things become ill. And that's when, you know, from my perspective, I was essentially seeing physical illness through like that could well, and quite often might well have been a psychological driver. And you were probably then seeing almost like the opposite side of things, where people perhaps have like the physical illness, you know, as you say, like maybe the obesity and whatever else. And then that, you know, because of those habits, it perhaps drives, you know, anxiety, and then, you know, feelings of suicide and whatever else. And yeah, and it was just, when I was kind of reading that the other day, I was like, it'd be really interesting from your perspective from the mental health side, because I'm sure you know, you were seeing plenty of people, and you probably still do in your work you do now with the kind of, you know, the teens must be a really interesting age. It's kind of a place I want to go more with my work, just in case of figuring out how. But like,
well, there's two things, like, you know, it's interesting because we are starting to move away from this. I think we are moving away from this kind of duality, in the sense that we're now, rather than mental health being there's something wrong with you, we're now looking at what's happened to you. You know, generally there's very few mental health problems that just, they don't appear out of nowhere, unless you've had a sudden brain injury, or you've taken too much you've taken too much MDMA one time and you've got a bit psychotic, you know, or whatever. You know, sometimes these things happen, and then that's kind of genetically based, and obviously genetics does have an impact, but I don't think it has such an impact as we once thought. It does seem to be more story. story
Yeah,
based.
yeah.
And the influences around you and how you kind of the narrative to how you integrate with life and what you can achieve and what you believe you're worth and how you view situations. But also what we're realizing is I think there's still, and it bugs me to an extent, like there's this huge school that still seems to be, it's all about your thoughts. It's all about your thoughts. And of course, thoughts, how you perceive the world, your attitude, how you see it, the lens you view it through, thinking wise, is huge.
Yes.
But you're not able to think rationally about a situation when your heart beats over 100 beats per minute and you're breathing, like say, probably 22 to 25 breaths per minute. And, you know, you've got a horrible feeling in your stomach. When you're in that sympathetic or you're in a deep parasympathetic state, you're not really able to engage that thinking brain. So all those kind of ideas of, yeah, I'm going to be like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be able to go into this social situation that I'm usually scared about and I'm going to be fine. When you're in a controlled environment, that's all good. But as soon as like, you know, the term is that your lid's flipped and you're suddenly like in there and you're like, oh my God, you'll just resort to your usual coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
So where the mind and body come together is that we need to give people the tools. And this is why your work is so amazing, is that it helps people, you know, develop a larger window of tolerance, but and just able to kind of recognize what's going on with them. So then they're able to close that lid, acknowledge, able to those new ideas, those new thoughts they want to embed, those new habits, and then run from them rather than always being like, oh my God, going on autopilot.
Yeah.
And I mean,
that's, yeah.
You know, and of course, you know, there are people that can just regulate themselves really easily, but that's this most people do struggle in certain situations. And that's why I think you say merging the two and kind of identifying your stress response to situations, what those triggers, you know, what essentially is that, are you trying to meet there? What need are you trying to meet by doing what you're trying to do, and kind of working around that to kind of how you want to manage that in the future. And that's why the two come together. You change your thinking patterns and you change your physiology, and then you start to get better results.
And that's the thing, I think, you know, from my perspective of like where I am these days, and as you say, the work I do is it's all about how like physiology drives like everything. You know, there's, you know, I'm kind of quite a big fan of old Robert Sapolsky's work and like his book, Why Don't Zebras Get Ulcers? If you've never read it, it's well worth a read. But like, again, and, you know, it's kind of, there's constantly this analogy of the zebra and the lion and how their physiology is doing exactly what ours is. But the problem is theirs is healthy because they switch off, whereas ours isn't, and we can't switch off. And the problem from there is then the ability to observe it and notice. And so you've probably seen, but I'm kind of all about going swimming in up my little icy lake down the road at the moment. And you know, I'm getting a lot of comments on when I post on social media, people saying like, I'm crazy, I'm mental, what the fuck am I doing? You know, why would you do that? It's dangerous, etc., etc. But, you know, being out for me, it's like currently on this journey of like, how can I observe myself in a stressful situation? And what happens when I'm in a stressful situation?
Yeah.
Like an icy bath is a stressful situation. Like physiologically, your heart rate goes up, your brain goes, what the fuck am I doing? I shouldn't be in this. I should be in front of the fire. And, you know, I don't deal with a lot of like, I wouldn't say, you know, I'm not a mental health nurse. I don't deal with mental health patients as such. But at the same time, I deal with people who have like anxieties, who come to me with anxieties and panic and whatever else. And there's a whole strong evidence base around using carbon dioxide therapy for panic attacks, because, you know, physiology again is driving that panic attack. And, you know, we kind of touched on at the beginning, say with like, you know, the trauma that you had as a kid and whatever else, and how you could have a traumatic event, but actually like that traumatic event drives your physiology to this place, and you can't let it go, which is like what you were saying about this sympathetic drive, and you know, you can't get out of that chronic state. And it almost drives this vicious circle. But in your head you go, well, my problem is that, you know, my mum was murdered, or, you know, that car accident I had when I was 10 and I can't get in a car now. That's not actually the problem anymore. Like, and I'm not like, people have had a go at me on social media before. Like, I'm not against CBT. You said like things like CBT are one of those steps you go through. I think that stuff's hugely, hugely important and valid, and being able to verbalize. But unless you can actually understand your physiology and how perhaps every time your brain goes to that place that you were just talking about, that kind of like, oh my God, like I'm going to have to go and speak in front of a whole bunch of people. What am I going to do? Like your brain goes to that bad situation, and you can go and talk about that bad situation like every fucking week forever. And you keep thinking, oh, I'm getting better. But then you still always get those butterflies. You still always get that, you know, and that stuff does always happen, but you still go into an overly dominant response. But actually being able to observe it and go, oh, actually, every time I do this, this happens. So perhaps at this time, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to take some breaths. I'm going to, you know, understand that it's a physiological response, and I'm going to learn to cope with that, rather than it being like a story I'm telling myself, exactly as you were just saying. Like 100%. It's that story you tell yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And this is, as I say, it goes back to that the thinking thing. It's not all about your thoughts. It is a lot about the physiology, and you know, and I think the problem with it is probably it's too easy. You know, like it's what people, I think the problem that we have these phones and we have this technology is that we've got so advanced that now we're like, oh, who's got the latest, when it comes to mental health, who's got the latest wackiest therapy, where we do all this stuff, this crazy stuff to you, and we ask all these weird questions, and maybe we get you dancing around a fire with a like naked or whatever, you know, some weird thing.
That sounds like my kind of idea, in all fairness.
I know, it'd probably be great fun, I'm sure. Maybe we take a load of drugs and everything will be amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say.
We're literally thinking, you know, we come up with these ideas, but I think what we're finding is actually the simple things, the simplicity of life is where we can heal. But ultimately it's a practice. It's not, we have Amazon now where you can click on, you can order next day delivery, you know, whatever you want. Now I think this is what people want from life. This is probably why they resort to medication, and also why people go, meditation doesn't work for me, breathing things doesn't work for me, blah blah. And of course there are going to be a few people where you have been so traumatized that you have to like pendulate into those feelings. You can't just dive straight into them, because you probably will get triggered, you might have flashback and all this sort of stuff.
100%, yeah.
But the majority, trauma is a big thing now. Everyone talks about trauma, and I think the trauma-informed way of working with people is really good. We create safety and we delve into what's happened to you. But most people haven't got PTSD, aren't triggering it. So I think, you know, it's about kind of, you know, I lost my train of thought here a little bit, but you know,
we're just saying
it's about going into it's about it's about the breathing. It's about that kind of community, and it's about the right connections and all that sort of stuff. And it's going back to these basics and
the thing you couldn't help but do before we were like isolated through. I mean, even like you said, like being next day delivery, it's almost like I watched The Dig just this week, like about Sutton Hoo, but you look at that in like pre-World War II, and it was like Suffolk was a big place back then. And actually you knew everyone in your village and you know, you didn't really venture too far, and you had all those connections. And now we're so like, the world is such a small place that actually, and you've got, like, I've got friends in Canada, Australia, New Zealand on Instagram, on Facebook, who I kind of chat with. But at the same time, like, do you know what I mean? Like I know about 4 of my neighbors. do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, it's, and I think that connection that you were just talking about, and actually having that really simple life is what our body and our brains currently don't quite understand. How, you know, we haven't evolved. This has happened so quickly. Our brains and our bodies haven't really evolved to cope with it as such.
No, exactly. And it's just taken away. It takes us away from our natural instincts to be around other people. You know, I think, and also probably the comfort of the current world, it takes us away from having a purpose, in a sense of, you know, I don't like to use the word entitlement all the time, but I'm going to use the word entitlement. I think we live in a world now where people believe they just should get stuff without doing anything. And as much as I do believe we should look after each other, I think in a way it's kind of stopped people from finding purpose, from finding some meaning in their lives, some way they can contribute and offer something to society, because they just think, well, maybe if I just knock out a few kids, you know, I'll get a TV, get a car, get a house, and I don't really need to do anything. I just do something I just, that's my life now. I don't have to offer or contribute to society. But, back in the day, as much as I'm so grateful that I get to choose what I want, because, 500 years ago, if I had to be like a slave, and that was just what my line, my genetic hereditary line was brought into, I'd hate that. But equally, like, it kind of, you just were born and you knew you had a role, and that gave you some purpose, and I think this is what we kind of miss now. And that's what I try and do now with people, is as much as I don't want people to say, you definitely shouldn't, just because your dad's been a lawyer or a doctor, you become that. I help people to identify what really matters to them, and then they can have a purpose. A purpose isn't like one thing you have to do with the rest of life, but just have some sort of purpose, even if it's just like, going to the next door neighbor, an elderly person, and helping them get some shopping, or, or just volunteering, or, whatever it is. When you have,
well, I mean, when there's, I remember reading some research about it, but like just how much positive benefit people get from like volunteering, like on some of those like questionnaire like scales of like their well-being, and their like how good they feel about life they get from giving, rather than constantly feeling like the need to be given or to receive. And actually giving is a far healthier way to go about viewing life, I guess, than than always just wanting.
Well, when people tend to get in that, I think have these existential crises or midlife crises that often get frowned upon, but actually I think it comes down to the realization that what is my purpose in the world? What am I doing? And I had that, 2-3 years ago, kind of because of the trauma I went through. I didn't realize it till 2 or 3 years ago, but I was kind of like, what the hell am I doing? And because of my experiences growing up, I kind of started to believe that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't lovable. It didn't matter. And then you kind of wake up and go, wait a minute, I just feel like, what am I doing? And it gets you so down when you don't have a purpose. And I think this is where a lot of depression and anxiety comes from, is because we don't have a purpose. But then when we start to think, well, what would I like to do? What lights me up? Where am I at my best? What do I love doing? What am I passionate about? And we start pursuing these things, and we start offering them in a way that helps other people. It really changes your life.
Yeah, 100%.
And the beauty of the current day is now that we get kind of, you can find you can have so many purposes, and you can delve into so many areas. And that is the beauty of the modern world. Like,
absolutely. I mean, it's really easy to like, what's the word? To shine a light on like how things used to be, and be like, oh my God, they were so much better back then. Life's real shit now. Really, life's never been better than it is now. Like, and from my perspective, like, all I want is to be able to like, and it's very similar to you, I think, but just give people some tools so that actually you realize how much choice you have. Like, and it's like choice to have a fucking good life, and like one that actually like suits you. And, I kind of talked to my wife about it. We're planning on a bit of a travel in the camper van and whatever else. And, there is always those questions of like, oh, but what about afterwards? Like, what are we going to do work-wise? And blah, blah. And then it's just kind of like, but like, that's in the future. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, whatever happens, we're both nurses. We can fall on our feet. Like, and like, there is such a world to see and to explore and to like experience, that actually that's one of the best things about now. Maybe we don't have the same connections as we did when we were all hang out in the village, but like, there is some really amazing like experiences that I could still go and be mates with all my neighbors, and I can also go and see the world. Do you know what I mean? But giving people the tools to realize that is kind of going to be pretty key.
100%. And I think what you said about the what if it goes wrong, what if is such a question that people have in their heads that puts them off doing anything, because it tends to get, naturally we're hardwired to focus on fear rather than love. But I think if we started asking, well, what if it works out? We start being curious and say, well, I'll find a way. Most people won't, like you say, be homeless and having to like, scrounge for crack and heroin or something just to make themselves feel good. It is literally, we do have the ability to survive now. We will probably, most of us, be okay. This is something I had to face. I quit my job, NHS. I just knew I wanted to be a speaker. I knew I wanted to do something more than what I was doing. I didn't want to be like, go see a psychiatrist, take the pills. I'll see you in a few weeks. Yeah, you're not unwell anymore. oh, that I'm well anymore. See you later. I wanted to
Yeah.
feel like I could do something more. So and I was fortunate. I sold my house, so I had a bit of money. I could do it, but I just skirted around, and I was like, I don't really, all that certainty that I had before, I had to let go of. But I knew I'd find a new certainty, a new safety net. But you had to be, the problem is we like safety, we like comfort, but to really realize our potential, we have to get unsafe. We have to be uncomfortable and slowly step into that. You don't just throw yourself into the lion's den, but you kind of just slowly, you maybe like peek around the corner and go, oh, what's that? Oh, okay. He's, and then you gradually introduce yourself into it. And this is what people need to realize, that you don't have to change your life overnight. When it comes to mental health, physical, you just need to make slow, gradual changes. And that's really the way to go. It's those small.
Totally.
Now,
that's what.
Someone said it's like a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. Was it? I think it might have been Lao Tzu. Was it?
I was going to say, I think it's Lao Tzu. Yeah. It sounds like a Taoist thing to say.
That's such a good phrase for life, really.
It really is.
And I just think kind of, had that just plastered like every day, like one step. What's the one step I can do today?
What's the thing? Do you know what I mean? If you were to improve, weirdly, this is one of the footballers who said this, but I'm sure it's come from somewhere else. I'm sure he's not that philosophical. But he said, if you like someone was said, oh, I've like, it's got like 1% improvement or something like that. He's like 1% every day is 365% improvement over a year. And it's like, we kind of look at the small things being like so insignificant, but really like, as long as we just kind of keep putting small on small on small on small on small, it very, very quickly adds up to being huge.
It's like Lego, isn't it? It's like playing Lego.
Yeah.
You get like 1,000 pieces and you're like, oh, how am I going to build this? But you start at one brick, you lay it, and then you put another bit down. And that's kind of what we need to encourage people, really, that there's the saying goes, there are no overnight successes. And as much as it appears to us that someone blows up on social media, oh my god, they've just had one viral video, usually behind it is a story of a few years at least, and all the trials and tribulations of how they got to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the same, going into my cold showers and my cold baths and dunks again. People say to me, well, you're a bloody idiot, why you do it? And it's dangerous. You might get hypothermia. But again, I haven't just gone and jumped into a cold pond. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've spent months cold showering and, building up a tolerance to these things. And again, it's that little peak around the corner. Like, that's, getting in a shower and it being hot, and then you turn it down like half a notch. So therefore it's slightly colder. And then the next day you turn it down a bit more. We've got there's a step, as you say, one step starts with a single step.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to admit, like, some people won't, it makes me laugh how, we all think we're right. We think our view of the world is exactly how it is. And some of the stories, I said to someone about having a cold shower the other day, because I do it. I mean, I have to admit, I've lessened the time this time of year, because I'm like, bloody hell, my head feels like it's going to drop off.
When you get out of the cold, when you get out of the shower and the room's not warm, it's so hard.
It's horrible. But like, some people still like, oh, you can't do that because you'll get arthritis. And you're like, and all some of the stories we convince ourselves so we don't do things. Now, obviously that's quite an insignificant one. But I was like thinking, yeah, but have you actually looked at the latest research, the evidence that talks about that? Really, there's so many benefits to having a cold shower.
Yeah.
Why don't and of course, if you read it up and then you don't want to do it, that's fine. There's no problem. But literally, we believe our own stories as to why we shouldn't do things. It's like, and a really good example is like, and I hate this thing, but as a kid, we're usually told it's unrealistic to follow your dreams, right?
Yeah.
But I actually, what I throw back at it now is it's more unrealistic to be happy doing something you hate. And I think this is,
Yeah.
This is kind of that's basically what we're telling people. Don't do what you're interested in. Don't be passionate. Don't things you're passionate about. And then we go, well, why are you miserable? You should just be grateful. Well, actually, gratitude is a wonderful practice. There's loads of evidence for it. But actually, if your life is shit and you're doing things you don't like, it's really hard to practice gratitude.
Yeah, definitely.
It is really hard. And of course, we should be grateful for a roof overhead and things like that. But I actually think like we need to be like encouraging people to actually
step out a bit more.
Yeah, go for it. Go for something you're passionate about.
Yeah.
Go for something that matters to you, and that will change your life. And be curious. Just be curious. Like, this is what we need to tell people.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, definitely be curious. 100%.
Because it's like, the problem again with the group I work with, one of the problems is kids feel they have to have it all figured out, and you're like, bloody hell, I still don't have it all figured out. And
I look back on school and being a youngster, and I think, like, you know, with the school telling you you've got to fill in your national record of achievements and all. I mean, when the fuck was the last time you gave one of them that book of national record achievement to anyone? Do you know what I mean? And like, it's, you know, you're told at school, like at 15, well, is it 14 probably when you pick your GCSEs? Like, you've got to have, you need to know what you're going to do with your life at 14. Like, your brain isn't even developed by that time. Like, how are you supposed to know what you're going to do? Like, I still don't really know what I'm doing now, and I'm 37 in April. Do you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
And I've had all of the jobs. Like, literally, I've been a snowboard instructor, a yoga instructor, a nurse. Like, do you know what I mean? You can. I've done just about everything, and I've done them for 3 years or something. Moved on to something else.
And
3,
that's okay.
10, and it's amazing. Do you know what I mean? Actually, I get bored of stuff. Go do something else.
Yeah.
Get bored of stuff, and I've always fallen on my feet. It's like you say, it's always scary, but actually, like, I'm now at this stage where I am now. I'm working for myself. I'm doing the thing I'm really passionate about because I've like found comfort in discomfort. That's my thing for 2021 is like find comfort in discomfort. Like 100%. Put yourself out there.
Yeah, it's like lean into it. Just lean into it a little bit. Like, and that's why the one step thing is so good. You just try it a little bit. If you don't like it after a while, it's okay to change.
Yeah.
And
I mean, chances are you can probably get back to your life as it was.
Exactly. And what makes me like, I'm glad you mentioned the national record achievement, because I read mine not that long ago, because I found it going through some old boxes and I was like, oh my God, I literally write, I think they said, why, one of the questions is in it, why are you writing, or why are you writing this, like, I don't know, CV? And I was like, and I think I just wrote because I've been told to do it or something like that. And that's how it is, isn't it? It's
because Mrs. Sugar told me I had to.
But what that made me realize is that most of the people, young people, are just doing what they're told to do rather than doing what they want to do.
Yes.
And I think this is what we need to change. It's
you
know, what do you want to do that lights you up, that you can give to the world in a way? No, it doesn't. You don't have to be like, this is the thing we need to move away from, is that you don't have to go become a millionaire philanthropist like everyone in California seems to be. You can be like, you can just maybe just sweeping the streets gives you some purpose.
Yes. Even just being a nurse. Do you know what I mean? I look at my wife, like she's a nurse. Like I said this on one of my podcasts on before, but like I look at my wife and like she's born to be a nurse.
Yeah.
Like, it's like I see people like her and I think, like, you're fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I'm a good nurse. Don't get me wrong. I do, like, I'm not a bad nurse, but like, I wasn't born to do it. Whereas I look at people like my wife, she's born to be, like, her heart is just is there for people at that time. Do you know what I mean? And people like that, like, go be a nurse.
Yeah.
Like, that could be like your fucking life's dream.
Yeah.
Fucking do it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, it doesn't, as you say, it doesn't have to be super jazzy.
No, exactly. But it's I definitely feel like if we approach life like that, and I mean, my dream would be to like completely revamp the education system and have an education system that kind of identifies what kids are really excited about. And I know kids change. People go, they change their mind all the time, and you wouldn't have to be. It wouldn't be 100% flexible, but we should at least be focused on people's strengths rather than trying to focus on their weaknesses.
Force them into a box. I mean, from my perspective, I don't know if you've read it or not. My wife, I haven't read it, but my wife has read that Jay Shetty book that came out recently.
Oh yeah.
And he kind of says in one of the first chapters in that about how when he went to live in the monastery in India, like the little 10-year-olds were teaching the little like 6-year-olds how to breathe. So like the 6-year-olds, their education was like, learn to sit and breathe and learn to sit and be with yourself. And that was like the first thing. And you kind of brought it up towards the beginning of like how it's not taught in schools. And, you know, for me, it's kind of quite a passion, which I'm trying to figure out these days. But like, how do you get into like kids and teens and like start giving them the tools earlier?
Yeah, exactly.
So we're kind of starting to get towards the end of our time, really. But what I wanted to bring up was hardcore punk and hardcore metal and stuff, because like I said at the beginning, I think I said it at the beginning, we both met, I think we actually both met at Distinction.
Yeah,
like that's where I first really remember you. We were both like throwing our arms and legs around to I think Funeral for a Friend or something. Like, but to me, like, punk and hardcore and stuff has been like a huge influence on me becoming where I am today. Like, it's still the main music I listen to, and I kind of feel that the more I do this work, the more it seems there's a lot of people in this kind of I say this ever-growing field, this field of people who are giving to help. And, you know, from the yoga world, it's really weird, like this yoga hardcore punk crossover, which seem like they're such dichotomous like things, and there's such a crossover. And so, like, yeah, I kind of, before like we actually got recording, we were kind of briefly touched on it, but I'd be really interested to like know, if you like, how the hardcore punk scene maybe like influenced you, and how it's kind of, you know, how you kind of view it as like a positive thing, rather than what most people, I guess, look at it as being like a really kind of shouty negative, like everyone fucking hates their mum and all stuff like that. I mean, it's not new metal, is it? But
well, to be honest, that was my first perception. Even when I got into it, it was kind of my perception of it, even though I think in a good way though, because it kind of, I think what it first gave to me was like, it gave me a sense of community. Like, you know, when you're young, you tend to, you hang around people who have similar interests. And like, I found as I was getting towards the end of high school, I was hanging around with people who were listening to like Machine Head and Biohazard and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, I like this, because we just hang out, listen to music, and it'd be cool and do that. And but then, as you know, and it then just became part of my identity, and I loved it. But I think as I got older, and you know, when I started to kind of be more self-aware and be aware of like what was going on in the lyrics and stuff, I just realized that it is hardcore is as much as you say, it's like shouty people, oh, it's all angry, aggressive, we want to kill each other. And as I said, you know, you go to a show and people like windmilling and stuff, it can look intimidating to people.
Just briefly, in case you don't know what windmilling is, people who are listening, you've never been to a hardcore show, it's basically like big, like, I don't know, like a roundhouse kick from like, or like you're swinging your arms through, like, imagine you're doing a big morning warm-up stretch where you swing your arms around, stuff like that. You kind of like, when we go to hardcore shows, we tend to, there's a whole bunch of like dancing where you kind of swing your arms and legs around. So yeah, go on, sorry.
And if you go to something pretty tough like knuckle dust, then you might die if you're someone small like me. But there'll be people to look after you afterwards. But it's like such a, the thing is within hardcore, it particularly is, I think, like especially stuff like Hatebreed and stuff like that, you know, the more, and even though that's more mainstream, it's still like, it's all about togetherness, it's about unity, it's finding strength in those down times. And you know, you listen to the lyrics and it's about togetherness.
It's real posy, isn't it? Like there's like we kind of mentioned, like there's that PMA, like kind of that positive mental attitude. One of the bands who kind of really kind of sum up for me is like H2O, who, I mean, they're kind of like, do you know what I mean? They're pretty like bouncy kind of hardcore punk and stuff, but like, do you know what I mean? Like you listen to their story, you listen to their lyrics, and it like everything's super posy. Like it's absolutely, it's really very positive. Like how can you kind of, you know, you've got your crew, your family, your community, and you know, you're one and together and stuff. And
it's so welcoming, to be honest. And I had a really good experience. And I actually think I'll probably say in America, it's a little bit more welcoming than the UK. I sometimes find you go to gigs and you know, sometimes hardcore can step into that sceney way where oh, I look cooler than you, therefore I'm not going to approach you. But when I was traveling, I just done Africa, done India, and I just did a couple of weeks in America, and I went to New York, and Cruel Hand and Mind Force were playing a show. And they're two hardcore bands I really like. In both New York. Oh no, Cruel Hand are from Portland, I think, and obviously Mind Force in New York. But I went there on my own. It's this tiny little place, and I was quite nervous, thinking, oh, you know, I'm going to go there. I'm just going to sit there, have a few drinks, and just be on my own. Walked in, everyone's like, "Hey man, who are you?" And I was telling them I was traveling, and they're like, literally, I started hanging around with a band. I got to go hang out with Cruel Hand upstairs briefly, and all this sort of stuff. And I just thought. But to me, in that moment, that was kind of like what hardcore is. It's like it is a community, it is togetherness. And when we talk about communities and being around each other, I think from an outsider's perspective, it can look really harsh and heavy. But actually, when you're in it, it is about supporting each other. It's about, and you look at some of the really like, there's a foundation called the Hardcore Help Foundation, which they give loads of I think they give loads of clothes and t-shirts and stuff to like less well-off people in countries like Africa and that. And I remember loads of stuff like that. And I think that's what the Hardcore Foundation and Hardcore.
I think I remember like perhaps I want to say Boys Sets Fire or someone like posting about that at one point. I think they did a gig in Germany to raise money for them. I think something like that. Sounds really familiar. But it's kind of like, that's kind of my same view. Do you know what I mean? Like I kind of grew up listening to, I came from like the punk world, I guess. Do you know what I mean? Green Day, Offspring, stuff like that. Got into like the whole East Bay scene of like AFI, Nerve Agents, and then from from there, all of a sudden it's like very slippery slope, deep dive into 80s hardcore, and then sort of I don't know, into kind of the whole metal side of things. But so often, and for me, even like the angry, like pissed off, non-positive side for me has always still been a really positive thing, because actually having like an emotional outlet for something which isn't always like rosy and sunny is actually really, like, for me, is really bit like sitting in my car and listening to something which is just fucking angry, and just being able to like shout along when you're driving is such a release. It's such a release, and it's such a like an overlooked thing. And I get, people might not like shouty, like can't understand a word they're saying, but like oh gosh, I should have been a vocalist. But like I honestly think, again, it's kind of going back to social media people, but that Tony Riddle guy, you follow him, and he's like the naturalist. I can't remember what he's called himself now. But like he's all about go and stand in the middle of the woods and just fucking shout, just shout. And for me, like that's what I get from hardcore. Like I just get to stand, like sit in a car and just shout.
And when a breakdown kicks in and you're just like, and you're throwing your fists around and shouting.
Yes, there's definitely a whole bunch of dopamine being released at that moment.
100%. Because it makes me laugh because I think, in today's world, we're so uncomfortable with emotions that like there's so much in actually moving and expression that helps us. And like something positive, like, just having a dance or like throwing it down to knuckle dust or mad ball or something like that, it helps you kind of, I feel good for that. And that's kind of moving that energy.
Yeah.
And there's one thing that I'm quite into some of the spiritual stuff as well. Tex, and kind of think that I think it's quite good to have kind of personally, I find spirituality really helps me.
Yeah.
But one thing I remember some of the texts say you should listen to certain types of music, like classical music, because it's got good vibrations. It vibrates at a certain frequency and it makes you vibrate and all that nonsense to an extent. And I was thinking, no, because as much as classical music's nice, I actually vibrate at my best when I'm listening to a good beat down by Hatebreed or like some old Comeback Kid, or as I say, like, H2O, Biohazard, Mad, or whatever. That's what lights me up, and I think that's what hardcore did for me. It kind of, when I was in my pit, in my worst moments, just like putting on a record and just being like, right, I feel better now because I've moved, I've got something out of me, and so it doesn't have to really be hardcore. It does whatever lights you up. But for me,
that's the thing. Do you know what I mean? I think, and that's the thing. I think whether it is classical or whatever else. Do you know what I mean? If you've got that thing that works for you, and at times it's definitely I vibe off classical music at times. But at the same time, for me, most likely, I'm going to put on some like 80s hardcore, or even like late 90s, early 2000s like stuff, and it's just kind of just lifts me out of that space. And do you know what I mean? I think that's music is kind of pretty magic for that in general, 100%. But you kind of get all the feels. So I guess just to round up, is there any, like, where can people find you? Where can people find out more about you?
So I predominantly hang out on Instagram. As much as I get told I should go on all social media platforms, I hate Facebook. LinkedIn, I'm not a big fan of, and Twitter's full of assholes. So, so I tend to just.
Have you tried TikTok yet?
I've done a bit of TikTok and I went off it because I don't know.
I just don't get it.
I don't get it.
I think I'm too old.
Yeah, I'm all for. I love the fact that people love it, and I'm all for people doing what they want. But it just feels like people are just dancing or showing parts of their body and telling you how to flex on your ex and things like that, and get just thinking, not for me. But I probably will delve into TikTok. So Instagram's the thing. It's
cool. And what's your handle on that?
The Alex J Williams.
Cool. I'll put it in the notes so everyone can find that for sure. Yeah. Cool. Perfect. Well, I reckon we'll probably round ourselves up there. That's kind of about 50-ish minutes. So that kind of flew by pretty quick, really. But yeah, thanks so much for doing this. It's an absolute pleasure. We'll try and maybe at some point when we can do things in person again, we'll maybe try and do a little a catch up again. That would be wicked.
100%, mate. Cheers,
nice
mate.
one. Thanks so much, mate. I'll have a great week and I'll catch up with you soon.
Cool.
Cheers, fella.